Hey friends, this is Monica again. I'm excited to continue with you as we move forward in our communication series. The last time we were together, we talked about the fact that there are a lot of different barriers to effective communication, and we discussed some of those in our last session. Very briefly, I want to review the top four with you before we move forward today. Number one is this: making assumptions. I already know what others know, feel, and want. Number two is this: arrogance. I don't need to know what others know, feel, or want. Number three would be indifference. I don't care to know what others know, feel, or want. And then number four is control. I don't want others to know what I know, feel, or want. These barriers can keep us from being effective communicators. And while I believe that not everyone starts out with the same ability to connect, I am confident that anyone can learn to connect better and on a deeper level. Why? Because connecting is a choice. In fact, it is a mindset. And that's where we want to spend our time today. The mindset of connecting with people is, in fact, a choice. Will you today, number one, choose to be available? Available. Make yourself available to your teammates. Make yourself available to your clients and to your family members. Are you in the moment when you're with that person? Or would you be honest with me and say, Monica, sometimes I am distracted. Common ground has to be discovered as we attempt to connect with others. And that takes time. It takes time to get to know someone. I once heard someone say that the average or typical business executive in the US has an attention span of about 6 minutes. Don't be that person. In 6 minutes, a person can hardly get their feet on the ground, much less find common ground. Availability requires intentionality. There's that big word again, intentionality. Are you really available for your clients, or do you just go through the motions every day to get them to sign the agreement or to collect that premium? Are you just going through the motions to gather the required paperwork to send to underwriting? Are you really available for your clients? Are you really available to your team, to your coworkers? Are you willing to set aside more than 6 minutes to help someone complete a project or an assignment, or maybe even help a team member develop a skill that will add value, not only to them personally, but also to the team, and as a result, to the organization? The second mindset that I want to encourage you to embrace today as we become better communicators and better connectors is to ask yourself or tell yourself, I will be a leader who chooses to listen. Be a person who listens his or her way to common ground. I meet people so often who honestly are not good listeners, even though they may think they are, either because they have not acquired that skill or because they believe they have arrived in their quest to become a better leader. Listen, I would be the first to admit I haven't arrived yet in my quest to become a better leader. Richard has not arrived yet. One of the greatest leaders and trainers of all time, John Maxwell, would say to you today, he has not arrived yet. We are all still learning. We're still growing into our potential. And I want you to do the same. If you can learn to simply focus on what others are saying, instead of rehearsing in your mind how you want to respond to that person, you will be surprised at how much sooner you will connect with that person. Just learning that one skill. Become a better listener. I mean, let's face it, we have all found ourselves in a situation where you know the other person isn't really listening to you, no matter what you're saying. And let's face it, that creates distrust. Every interaction with someone is an opportunity either to build trust and respect or to create distrust. So If you want your team, your clients, and anyone really within your sphere of influence to trust you and to become loyal to you, then make it a goal today to become a better listener. And by the way, listening isn't just being quiet and giving someone your undivided attention. Yes, that is certainly a huge part of listening, but that's not all of listening. Listening really goes beyond that to include watching someone's body language. Maybe it includes their facial expressions and their mood or any variation from their natural behavior or tendencies. Here's a great example. I have a friend who several years ago hired a new employee, and the employee was doing a great job. In fact, my friend considered herself, and still does today, to be a great listener, and she is a good listener. She's a great friend of mine. She's also an effective leader, and she's confident in her own ability to hire a good employee. And sure enough, she was thrilled with the positive impact that this new hire made within a short amount of time in the organization. They even became friends in a short amount of time as well. Less than a year or so had passed. And my friend began to notice a change in her new employee. She noticed that the employee didn't seem as engaged as she once was. She also noticed that she didn't seem quite as enthusiastic about her work, and her demeanor simply wasn't the same. So finally, my friend noticed that this change in her employee even began to affect the bottom line. So she invited the employee to lunch and found out that sure enough, she had some personal problems that she was dealing with at home. And she did not want to bring those problems to the workplace. She didn't feel comfortable sharing the details with my friend, her supervisor, which is totally natural. That's understandable. So here is my friend who thought that she was a terrific leader or a listener. In this case, honestly missed the boat. Why? Because she wasn't looking for the signs. You see, listening is really a full-time job in the workplace. And it involves not only listening with our ears, not only giving someone your undivided attention, but it also involves being actively engaged in each of your employees' lives if you're going to be the leader that you were called to be. Someone once said, listening requires giving up our favorite human pastime, and that would be involvement in ourselves and in our own self-interest. Will you also have the mindset to say, beginning today, I will choose to be a leader who asks questions? Are you comfortable asking others questions? When you're getting to know someone better and the goal is to find common ground and to connect with someone, don't just ask close-ended questions. You've probably heard that before. So any question that requires only a one-word response is probably not a great way to get to know someone. For you parents out there, if you really want to get to know more about your kids' life, your kids' friends, what's going on at school with your kids, never ask close-ended questions. I have 3 children. I have certainly learned that. So, for example, instead of, hey, did you have a good day at school? And they can say yes or no. I always like to ask my kids, what is one thing that you enjoyed most about school? Of course, with my 12-year-old, usually it's recess or lunch. I can usually predict that answer. I also, though, like to ask if there was one thing that you could change about your day. If you had a magic eraser and you could go back and erase one thing about today, what would that one thing be? You'd be amazed at the responses that you'll hear from your kids, and you can get to know them better. You see, we can use the same simple method in the workplace also. And as we're really trying to connect with others, a great place to start is simply to ask why. Why is a good one. When I'm coaching someone, I will often say, tell me more about that. Or I will ask, why? So if I'm at an event or you're at an event and your goal is to meet some new people at this networking event, maybe you would ask that person what they do for a living. And they might respond by saying, well, I've just recently taken a new job. The next thing you could respond with is simply, why? Tell me more about that. Why did you take the new job? Asking why and tell me more about that, that phrase will always keep a conversation going, but will also allow you to take the focus off of yourself and shift it over to the other person. If you struggle getting to know people, or you consider yourself a little bit shy, you could also try using the form method. Those of you who are in sales, this is probably not new to you, but for some of you, it will be new. It's a simple acronym, and again, it's FORM. F stands for or represents family. Ask your friend, are you married? Do you have children? Or O is occupation. Find out about their job, their career. R is recreation. And then M is motivation or message. Using this simple acronym will help you to have small talk, but with big results. Here's another mindset shift. Will you be a person who says, I will be a person who is thoughtful? Will you think of others and look for ways to simply thank them? We don't do that enough in the workplace or outside the workplace. John Maxwell said he could remember many years ago. He was a pastor at an understaffed church, and he really felt the demands of his role as a pastor. He was being very intentional in this season in his life, and as he was working with the top 20% of his members personally, in terms of their leadership ability. He wanted to develop more Sunday school class opportunities. He wanted to develop more outreach programs for the church. And there were several other needs that he saw in the community. And so he knew that, that he needed to be intentional by working with the top 20% of his members. And so when he saw a name show up on his calendar, he recognized that this person wasn't someone who wanted to be in that top 20%. It wasn't someone who was a leader in his church. And so he was a little bit confused, and he ended up calling the receptionist and his personal assistant and said, why did Joe make an appointment to meet with me? And the personal assistant said, I have no idea. She just said that she wanted to meet with you, John, and so I scheduled an appointment. And John admitted that he was a little bit frustrated because he was trying to use his time wisely. He was trying to pour into the top 20%, those who had already shared an interest in helping him grow the church. In fact, John later admitted he was kind of annoyed. She said, John, he just wanted a few minutes of your time. And so John agreed to meet with him. John's goal, he admitted, was to get him in and out in a hurry. So when Joe arrived, John asked him, Joe, what can I do for you today? And Joe said, well, Pastor, nothing at all. You see, I'm actually here to ask you, what can I do for you? I know you have been so busy. I know you have all these demands on you. And I've been asking myself, how can I help my pastor? And it came to me. He said, I realized that, Pastor, I have Thursday afternoons free. And I would love to spend that time simply running errands for you every week. Don't you wish you had someone coming into your office asking you if they could just serve you and run your errands once a week? John said he was not only shocked, but he was ashamed. Do you think that Joe found common ground with John? You better believe it. If you're able to show thoughtfulness and really invest time in others in some simple way, you will be way more likely to find common ground with them. From this day forward, will you also begin to choose to be a person who is open to others? If both parties are not really open, then the connection is closed. You see, most of us have this invisible wall that we put up around ourselves. We've got to be willing to be transparent and even vulnerable. It's okay to be vulnerable as a leader. Elizabeth Dole, I think it was back in 1996 at the Republican convention, she was asked to speak. And she shared with the audience that she was going to be breaking tradition by leaving the podium and moving into the audience to share from her heart. And although everyone was surprised, the audience loved it. She did break tradition. She walked from behind the podium and she moved through the crowd as she shared her speech. She connected with the audience in a way that that would have never happened had she stayed behind that imposing podium. You see, sometimes as leaders, we can be great listeners, but still not necessarily be comfortable being open with that same person that we're listening to. If we really want to maximize that connection, we have got to be willing to open up as well. It makes us real as leaders. I will care about people and what they think. Here is another mindset I want you to embrace. You see, people like people who like them. That's simple enough. Remember the quote I have shared with you, more than once now over the past 2 years. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. People don't care how much they know until they know how much you care. When you are sharing all the benefits of a policy with someone, it will land on deaf ears until they know that you truly care about them. Not what's in it for you, but how can you translate those benefits to directly impact them. When someone knows that you do care, you just become likable to them. And being likable is a highly attractive quality to possess, and it causes others to want to connect with you. Isn't that exactly what we want? Sure it is. Today, will you also begin to embrace the mindset and say to yourself, I will learn to be humble? Will you choose to think of yourself less so that you can think of others more? Poet, journalist, and editor Alan Ross asserted this: humility means knowing and using your strength for the benefit of others on behalf of a higher purpose. You see, the humble leader, he said, is not weak, but strong. He is not preoccupied with self, but with how best to use his or her strengths for the good of others. A humble leader does not think less of himself, but chooses to consider the needs of others in fulfilling a worthy cause. Isn't that wonderful? What a great perspective on humility. John Maxwell shares a story of being asked, along with several other speakers, to speak at this 3-day event. And John Maxwell was to be the speaker who would share last. And he said he was the closing speaker. John said that every speaker, one by one, all weekend long, stood up and they shared their success stories. They shared their success in their family, their success in their businesses, and their success in all that they had accomplished over the past X number of years. In fact, he went on to say that it seemed like each speaker was trying to out-success the last speaker. The audience was bombarded by success stories, and by the end of the weekend, John admitted that he was too. So he considered, how can I change things up a bit? How can I share something different that will encourage the audience? So John did something completely different. As he closed up the weekend, he decided to share some of his failures as a leader and some of the lessons that he'd learned as a result. And with each honest story of failure, John was connecting more and more with the audience. By the time he finished speaking, he received a standing ovation. He received thunderous applause. It wasn't because of John's accomplishments. It wasn't because of the number of books that he had written or the number of times he had spoken to an audience. It was well received because he gave the audience hope. Hope. You see, I don't know about you, but I love to be in the presence of a humble leader because they will always bring out the best in others. Humility means that you have a capacity for self-criticism. Are you okay with that? Are you okay with self-criticism? And that you can also allow others to shine. Are you okay with that? Are you okay with others taking credit, even if they took some of the credit from you? Are you okay shouldering more of the blame than maybe you needed to? This is what a humble leader does. So, as a reminder, I want you to learn today to be willing to admit your weaknesses. Be patient with others' weaknesses. Be open to correction. Point the spotlight on others often. And will you just choose today to be a leader who will also learn to adapt? In order to do this, you've got to be willing to move from your world to their world as we're learning how to embrace this mindset of connecting. You see, adapting means moving to the other person's place. I want you to learn to see things from the other person's point of view. Joel Dobbs is an executive with a very successful large company that happens to be headquartered in Tokyo, Japan. He said he learned early on the importance of connecting with your team and with others. In fact, he said that he had to admit he faced many difficulties connecting with his staff in Japan. There was a language barrier that certainly was a challenge. There was also a culture barrier. They were all potential barriers. And he said, frankly, it was sometimes a minefield. And he went on to say that he had to learn to be very careful, to use only the basics of words. And often he even needed translators, which could make the interaction seem even more impersonal. But Joel learned this. He found that something as simple as sharing a meal together when he visited Japan and intentionally ordering the strangest thing off of the menu that he could, he found that by reaching into their world, being willing to remove himself from his own world or his own place to adapt to them and to their culture, he said it made all the difference in the world. So anytime you recognize that there is in fact a gap between you and the people that you want to influence or lead, it would be wise to learn how to move to their world mentally. So let's summarize all that we've discussed today. If you're going to be a leader who cultivates this common ground mentality or mindset, as you begin to learn to connect with others, you're going to have to make some changes. Are you okay with those changes? I hope that you are. I hope that you're up for the challenge. So number one, I want you to choose to spend time with others. Number two, become a great listener. Number three, ask great questions. 4, think of others before yourself. Number 5, allow people into your life. Be transparent. Number 6, choose to actually care about people. Number 7, become a person of humility. And number 8, learn to adapt to others. You'll notice that each of these 8 mindsets are also evident in the heart of a servant leader. Thank you for the opportunity to spend time with you once again today. I hope that you are all doing well, and I cannot wait to see you again in person. Have a great afternoon.